Hi, everybody. I am Heather Fromack. I am the program manager for HSLDA's Educational Consultants, and we are so happy that we can connect with you via Facebook Live. I know at this time of physical distancing, this time of social connection is so important. And so today I am really excited personally, and I know you will be blessed by our guest today. We are here with friends of mine and ministers to many, Derek and Cheryl Carter. And Derek and Cheryl are going to talk very authentically and practically today about marriage and ways to really thrive in the midst of this really unprecedented and intense kind of time. So I am going to introduce them briefly, and then I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they have so much to share. We need a whole show, actually, to explain all the things that they do and the ways that they serve. But especially important for us today is to know that they have been married for over 30 years. Even though they don't look over 30 years old, they have been married more than 30 years, and they are authors, counselors, speakers, ministers, and they have written really helpful content and have a marriage ministry as well. So that's where I'm going to introduce them today. They're a homeschooling family with 5 children, 2 adopted and still home. But Derek, why don't I let you just share a little bit about also what you do. You have an amazing ministry and job to fathers that I think is important for people to know. Could you tell us a little bit about that first?
Sure, thank you, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a director of a fathering program. We work with fathers to help them better engage with their children. We also have a ministry, Foundation for Family Success, and an offshoot of that is a ministry of intentional dad. And basically we want to help dads just to understand that to be a father, to be a dad is intentional. It doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen just by going through your day-to-day activities. If you don't plan for it, then it won't happen. So there's some strategic things that we have to do intentionally to be the father in our children's lives. And so it's just my role to help fathers to understand that and to give them practical tips on how to work that out.
And you also, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, in addition to that, Cheryl and I are both Christian counselors. We do marriage and family counseling. We've written on that. We speak on that. We're very passionate about it. We've been married for 33 years, 34 is coming July. And we're just very passionate to see marriages thrive.
That's so awesome. And that's important all the time, but especially uniquely needed right now as people are so intensely having more time together than usual. Lots of times things come up that you can maybe walk away from when you're going off to work or running your day-to-day life. So Cheryl, tell us a little bit about you and the ministry that you have.
Okay, well, ministry I have. Well, I'm a homeschooling mom. I also am a working from home mom. So I do that too. So ladies, always come with suggestions. But I work really close with homeschooling a lot in the homeschooling community. Do a lot of writing and helping kids write well and encouraging people to use that as a ministry. So that's pretty much it. Oh, and I forgot, I'm on HSLDA Compassion Board.
Yes. Well, you wear so many hats, Cheryl. Like I said, we could do a whole show, and you've been such an encouragement to me. You're a real leader in every arena, both of you are, that you're in. But I think what's also uniquely relevant to your story today is you guys live in Long Island. You live in the hotbed of where a lot of greatest intensity of this coronavirus is happening. Could you tell us just a little bit, give us a little context to what your day-to-day life, how it's changed?
Well, it's interesting in terms of how it's changed is that I find that when I get up in the morning, we're at the epicenter here. So I get up in the morning, sometimes I have to really struggle. I had to pray first because I didn't necessarily want to turn on social media or the news. And to be honest with you, and this was hard for me because I work from home and everything is online now. It's actually even pick up my phone because I don't want to be a downer, but sometimes like just seeing people who in the hospital. So, because we're all in social media now, so people in the hospital, they post a picture. It's not just I'm in the hospital, so picture being very visual. So we're seeing everything happen. And I don't want to digress too much into it. We'll probably get to say, but it's pretty intense here now. Would you say?
Yeah, it's very intense.
Yeah.
A lot of people are afraid.
Yeah.
A lot of fear, a lot of speculation as what might happen, and what we've been hearing that things will get worse before it gets better, which is likely to be true. So we're doing everything that we know to do that is that makes sense in terms of what we're being asked to do. We're sheltering at home, exercising social distancing when we do go out, if we have to go out. And really, the thing is now is not to go out unless you really have to.
Yeah.
Right.
I think some people aren't taking it seriously, or some people say, "Oh, they were trying to scare us," and so they don't want us to go out and do things. And they, the CDC, is really trying to protect us and protect us all. This is the time for now to be our brother's keeper. Even if you feel like you have a strong immune system and the virus is not going to take you out, well, be your brother's keeper. You might pass it on to somebody else. And I think this is a time you want to, as we're Christians, so to me, as a Christians and as believers, this is one of the ways we can practically minister out to the people around us and say, I'm going to do the responsible thing. Now, there's times and things we could do to help, but not to do things that are going to be reckless, so to speak. We're obeying authorities that God has given us, and so we are sheltering in place.
And we, overall things, I mean, we're doing what we need to do, what makes sense and what is common good. But at the end of the day, and then as what Cheryl said in the beginning of the day, our faith is in God. We trust God to bring us through this period that we're going through now. Ultimately, we are just truly trusting God.
Yeah, right. And that's such a rock to stand on, especially in times like this. And I want to just mention too to our viewers that please let us know where you're watching from. Please let us know what kind of questions you might have throughout this time. I'm sure you will want to ask this wise couple things that are related to your day-to-day life and your marriage. And so I know you've given us 5 tips for keeping a strong marriage. And I do love too that you've got this within the context of our quarantine right now. So as we go through those, if people have questions, just let us know. I know I'm going to have questions. So you ready to start? Should we start with number 1?
Yeah. Can I just say, when you were just to give context to what we're going to say, I was watching something on television, and one of the businesses that is thriving now is a divorce business. Seriously, divorce lawyers. Divorce lawyers are saying that when in times of crisis, they make a lot of money. They even though they may be sheltering in place, the business is booming because in times of this, people have called and said, even within the first week or so, as soon as we get out, we're coming to get a divorce. As soon as and so this is real. So when what we're sharing is not something that's, oh, this is kind of nice that you would want to share. People face some real issues when they're forced together. They're forced together in crisis, and we're going to relate this because it is a homeschooling broadcast. We're going to relate to the homeschooling family, but it can relate to all families. But we're going to relate to homeschooling families because there's some particular stresses that come with homeschooling that don't necessarily come in the broad society.
Right.
That's right.
As married couples, unknowingly many times we're married, but we live separate lives. You go out to work. You have your activities. Your wife may have their activities, and sometimes you just kind of together, but living 2 different lives. And so when it comes to this point that we're at now, where we're quarantined, sheltering in place, sheltering home, to make different terms, is kind of forcing a new paradigm, because now you're kind of being forced together that you don't normally do, and challenges can arise. And again, there's so much intentionality in terms of our roles as parents and as spouses. And if we're not intentional about those things to help our marriages strive, then times like this can cause separation, or it can cause, as Cheryl said, that we're seeing now a higher rate of divorce, or leading, or they're expecting that there's going to be a higher rate of divorce after this epidemic is over. That pandemic.
Pandemic. Yeah, well, yes. And you know what could be our hope and prayer is that it lasts long enough to where people cannot escape and they eventually choose to work things out. And, sometimes that desire to run can be mitigated if you can't run for a longer period of time. So maybe that's what we can talk about with that kind of hope today, is that your tips, that anybody can apply them to make progress in their relationship and maybe give it another go. So you start with step number 1. Why don't you tell us that first step that you have here?
Well, step number 1 is to have a routine. It's important that now we've probably been in this longer, being in New York, right outside New York City. We've probably been in this long, I think, than most of the country. Maybe Washington State, maybe a little bit before we were.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to have a routine, because what can happen when you're sheltering in place and you're constantly home, you can run into this phenomenon where you don't know what one day is from the next, because the days seem so similar. So you're not getting up, going to church. The kids are not doing their Saturday activities. Dad's not doing his regular job. So those workaholics out there, let's just get this balance of both. Workaholics will find themselves working every single day of the week, 24/7, because they'll see it as an opportunity to catch up on work. And so for them, they're constantly doing it. For those people who aren't necessarily workaholics, but it's like, okay, I need a break because you just burnt out. You could be in your pajamas for 7 days and not even know it. And I read something about, be careful about wearing pajamas. I'm not going to say the joke the right way, but if you wear pajamas the whole time and you step on the scale, you won't even notice until you get ready to put on your regular clothes.
That's right. They're calling it the quarantine 19.
Yeah. So it's really important that you establish a routine. And it's also important for the kids in terms of just keeping things as normal as possible, that they have a routine. It's really hard. I know what our kids are like, oh, we're not doing this. And they'll get up in the morning and they'll say, what are we doing today?
Right.
They want to do something different. So it's really good also when you're establishing a routine, is them wanting to do something different. And those who may be schooling at home, they may actually find it easier, because maybe your kids, when you get up, they only are expecting to school from Monday through Friday. So my kids get up and they do say, oh, wait a minute, it's Saturday. We don't have to school. We're not. So it's important that you have a routine and that you both know what the routine is.
Yeah. So did you guys take time to plan? Of course, everybody approaches routine differently. Some people like really structured routine. And other people like a more of a high level kind of routine. I know for me, routine as a homeschool mom has always been sort of like my kryptonite. I always want a more structured routine than I actually accomplish. And I think I'm fighting against my own personality and setting expectations for my family. Sometimes that leads to conflict. Do you guys approach routine in the same way? How do you work through your differences or your different perspectives on what routine should look like?
Well, I was going to say this. Everybody has a routine. You just don't realize it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So if you're getting up at 11 o'clock, that's your routine. So in terms of us, most interesting, because Derek was an essential worker. So actually more families probably had their husbands, when I speak to them, their husbands were probably home a lot longer than you finally came home and started working from home. So I was already, so because of that, the boys' soccer was canceled and baseball was canceled and karate was canceled and our homeschool co-op was canceled. I kind of had things shaved off. And so my routine, I was able to adjust my routine ever so slightly. So Derek kind of stepped into what was already our homeschool routine. Am I correct when I say that?
Right. And I think what the important thing was that me realizing, okay, Cheryl works from home. She homeschools as well. So she has a routine of things that, times she gets up and things she has scheduled. So now that I'm working from home, the danger could have been like, I'm going to come home and I'm like, well, no, the boys should get up this time. No, the boys, they should do this first and do that first. So even though these could be great ideas, but these could be great ideas.
But I'm sure they're fantastic ideas.
but I just can't commit and disrupt her routine. You know, that would be a trespass.
Ooh, that's good. That's good.
They'll finish their work and they'll say, "Can I ask Dad?" And I'm like, "No, don't ask Dad. He's not going to read over your." Because it has to be done, because we both have different. Well, that's one of the other things in the list. I won't jump onto it. But we both have different things on how we do it.
Derek, I appreciate that, because that is a very insightful and sensitive way for you to step into that routine, that rhythm. And yet, at the same time, as a dad, and as a very intentional dad, as you've said, can you give just a couple of things, because we'll move to your next step, just a couple of ways that you've intentionally stepped into the routine of the day that's been helpful, or maybe, let's get real, maybe not so helpful? So,
well, I think
not wrestling with the boys in the middle of homeschool, you still haven't accomplished that.
I have not.
No, because you still wrestle with it.
Well, it's a little, you know, it's kind of like a praise break. You know, it's like a little break in the day. So I kind of, I try not to do it to the extent that it's really causes disruption with your own routine is. But I think for me, what it was is when I came home and the boys heard that I was going to be home, they're like, "Oh, wow, great." I'm like, "Wait a minute." So understand that I'm working from home. You know, I have my office space upstairs, and so I'm working from home. So it doesn't mean I'm going to walk past them and not say hello, but, you know, understanding that it's not going to be me playing, or it's not going to be a Saturday.
right.
You know, this is a work day, just that I'm working from home. And so I in my office working, you know, every now and then they may stop in if they're going past the room and, you know, say hi, whatever, and you know, but just them understanding that I'm home to be working. And so that was an important thing as far as setting up guidelines, or, you know, them understanding the routine. And I think what also happens that, so Cheryl has, with homeschooling and with her work, her routine isn't the same every day. So I think the good thing is that we either do it the night before or the morning of. What are your plans for the day? What is your routine for the day? So that way, you know, there are some times where she may be doing another video conference. And so, you know, I may have the company of our dog in my office to ensure that he's going to be quiet. So he'll be us with me in my office when I'm doing work. And so it's, again, understanding what each person's routine is. As I said, you know, I'm home. So yeah, of course, we're going to have interaction, you know, the same way when I'm at work, I'll call to see how things are going on at home. So Cheryl and the boys may come upstairs to see how I'm doing, just kind of take a break. But when I let her know, okay, well, this time I had this conference call, I have this video conference call, they know my routine for the day. And so they understand that, you know, we have to work together so that we can complement one another, so that both our routines are staying intact.
Right. Now,
That's good.
I know this is going to be a question that some moms might have. Now, we have a set of older kids that have since graduated, they're working, finished college and graduate school and all that. And then, so we have the younger kids. Now, some moms may be saying, but I want my husband to be home because I want him to be actively engaged in the homeschooling. And so some of you may be thinking, because I know that I used to think that, like, I want my husband actively engaged in the homeschool. In the case of Derek and I, in case some of you are wondering, because this is a great opportunity for your husband to be engaged in the homeschool, and it really works. But in the case of Derek and I, because of the intensity of his work, I would prefer him to engage in his work during the day, me keep my schedule, and then him do things with the boys in the evening. Like, so like yesterday you did the reading, you went over the reading comprehension with them because you were concerned about their reading comprehension, but it was good, so he was involved, but I still prefer having my day being, because I'm already balancing with the boys, sticking with the boys here and there, with me doing the majority. And I know for some women, they'll be like, no, but I want my husband to do the majority, or to do at least part of it while he's home. I think that's great. If for us though, that isn't what we chose. And that's why I said it's each one. Now, several years ago, let's say we were in this situation, I probably would have chose the light. I would say, oh, you know, I would have liked Derek to do, say, equal with me with the homeschooling if he wasn't as stressed at work.
Right.
But that doesn't work for us right now.
Right. And that's a way that we can try to complement one another. But again, respecting each one of the routines. So again, like yesterday, even though I'm working, I still take lunch. So when I came downstairs to have lunch, you know, it gave me an opportunity to, boy, so I finished my reading comprehension. Let's go over it together. So that gave me a chance to, you know, I'm working from home, to engage with them, It gave Cheryl a slight break from one of her responsibilities. But again, we work together to complement one another.
Well, see, that's the thing I'm hearing. I'm hearing a lot of flexibility and adaptability and trial and error, and that's real, right? We tried this, that didn't work. I tried this, that didn't work. It worked differently at different seasons, and that fits into one of the questions we have from Shanetta. Thank you for joining us. She says, how do you maintain a schedule with working full-time and homeschooling with a 1-year-old and a teenager? And I mean, that's a whole show in itself, right? But I also think that you can fit that into your next step. Step 2 is set goals for each day. And I heard how you guys plan together and you set expectations for each other and the boys and the kids. So maybe you could speak a little bit to adapting to a working schedule and how you set goals each day together. Because that's your step 2.
Right, yeah, that's step 2. All right, so when I say set goals, like Derek will tell me this is the major thing I have to do. So he might have a meeting or something, or he kind of alluded to it. I don't know completely everything he has to do. He'll tell me his goals as they reflect on me or the kids, and I'll share him my goals as they reflect. Like I'm not, no, we're doing this together. But if I was doing a conference and it was just me, I might not get into the whole thing with the conference. I'll just say from 10 to 11. I need quiet, so can you take the dog and the kids or whatever, or don't have them come to you. So that's the way. We don't really have a lot of time to be real, like to get into all the full goals, but just having a goal, like this is the one thing I want to accomplish, and this is how it reflects you. Now, if I'm speaking on time management, yes, do I have my goals every day? Because we are sheltered. I started doing, since being sheltering in place, what are the major 3 goals I want to accomplish today? I don't do more than 3. There's a reason why I don't do more than 3. But I don't do more than 3. And I may just tell him like the way the goals reflect back on him. And in regard to the person who, just to answer that question, she said, how do you do it all? We probably look at homeschooling very differently. If you have a teenager really should be, but with all our kids, like our older kids, one of my goals when I first started homeschooling, and it's my goals even with my little guys, is I'm working towards them being independent learners. So a lot of actually, even with their work, even though my boys do have special needs in terms of learning, I'm still working towards them working towards being more independent. And so some of, in terms of my goals and my routine, it's set up. Some of the times when they're more independent is set up when I am busy, if I'm with a client or working with somebody. So I'm not sure if that helps the caller with the 1-year-old.
Well, I think it's a good input in that you're really thinking about the goals you have, not just for your day, but also for your kids and for your marriage and for your work, and all of those things are a part of the goals that you guys are processing. And then since you've already set a daily routine, it seems like those fit nicely into your plan already to have a daily routine. So the other thing you mentioned, which would happen with a 1-year-old and a teenager for sure, and marriages, like Amy asked earlier, she was thinking people are staying together, and she was thinking marriages might get stronger through this time. Maybe they will if they have some intentionality, like you're talking about so much, Derek. But you mentioned in step 3 having a conflict resolution meeting. Step 1 was keep a daily routine. Step 2 was set goals for each day, and you talked a lot about flexibility and expectations in that. And number 3 you have is have a conflict resolution meeting. So Derek, what in the world is that?
So, well, before I move there, one more thing with goals, and I'll say this more so for the dads. It's important to have goals, like when you're working, whether you're working at home or working in an office, to have your to-do list and the goals you need to achieve for that day. Because when you have those laid out, you're more likely to get it completed, and you're less likely to have to stay to work later to get things done. Because when you don't have goals for the day, or I call my to-do list, what I love to have, I'm one of those guys who I get a thrill when I have a to-do list and I check everything off at the end of the day that I thought I've been productive. So I met my job responsibilities, and of course there always can be emergencies or things like that. But for the most part, it helps me that I can, like now when I'm working from home, I can complete all my work, and so after 5 or what time I finish, then I can dedicate that time to the family. Now, conflict. So every couple, you know, you kind of know what are those tricky areas. You know, those kind of areas that, you know, there are differences in your relationship, there's differences in how you do things. And so I think reason why Cheryl and I came up with that, because when I told her that, you know, okay, starting Monday, I'm going to be home, you know, kind of like it was, you know,
I was trying to be.
what do you call it? It's like a blessing and a cursing, you know, it's like, and so she was happy to have me home, but I think she was envisioning with us. And we sat down and talked about that.
Yeah.
You know, one of us tends to be a little more of a neat freak, and the other one tends to be less of that. And we kind of, we can have the potential of doing things differently. So being close together, and Heather, what you said a moment ago is true. Marriages could come out of this stronger, but it depends on how you prepare for it.
Right.
Again, what the intentionality of that. And so we talked about those things that, and you can probably elaborate more. You know, what are the things we were concerned about with us being sheltering in place?
Yeah, we were.
Taste and see that your husband is here all the time, sheltering in place.
Yeah. And I said to him, I said, Derek, he said, what did I do? What did I do? I said, I didn't say anything. I said, but I'm just saying, if this happens, what are you going to do? What is going to be your response? And what's going to be our response? I mean, because what happens is, Heather, and this is the reality, you're right, some marriages can get stronger, but the reality is too, I understand why they can be divorced, because we start, you're in a pressure, you know, I don't want anyone to, because sometimes people could feel bad, like, I'm not getting close to my husband, we're actually growing apart. And so I say this as marriage counselor, like, there's conflict around parenting. Let's face it, there's conflict around money. I don't know about everybody else, but and everybody does things different. But from what I do, yeah, it's been affected financially. I don't have as much money coming in, honestly, as I did before. The university was, you know, last one hired, first one to go. You know, all these great things about, you know, not every, you know, and so you have financial, you have parenting. Like, we think different about parenting. Our boys, we love them dearly, but like I said, even in homeschooling, they have learning differences. So I teach them a different way, and I teach them in a certain techniques. I might research. I don't necessarily have time to sit down and go through it. Derek said, okay, this is the reason I approach it this way is because of the research. Now you've seen major progress with them. So you might not, like, he might be like, oh wow, like, this one is reading well above grade level, or this one is, but he doesn't necessarily know that, well, maybe I did a whole pictorial thing that I may have thrown everything out the window when we did pictorial phonics.
Right.
He doesn't know that I did, you know, he might come in and see them playing with blocks, per se. He doesn't know that those blocks might be Cuisinart rods, they're doing number, well, you might know that. But you understand, like, sometimes parenting, homeschooling, conflict, all those things open up for conflict sometimes just because you don't have the time to explain everything. And I'm not, and just so you know, ladies, I'm not the neat one. I wrote the books on organization, but I'm the one who struggles. I do struggle. And so it's funny because I used to say, okay, guys, Dad's going to be home. And they were like, okay, we got to clean up before Dad gets home.
No, Dad is home all the time.
Yeah. Well, and the days that they know that Dad was late, and well, honestly, we didn't clean up till late. So, like, you know, so now we don't have that. So now we're like, oh man, we got to clean up after homeschooling. So sometimes we're in the middle of a project, we're like, oh man, that's what we got to clean it all up.
Well, I like what you said. I love this idea of having a conflict resolution meeting ahead of time, because Pamela even mentions here, you know, together all day long, everybody can maybe expect that there's going to be more stress, but then she mentions, but she and her husband have different ways of dealing with that stress. And those might end up being triggers for a marriage also. But what I like about what you said here is, when you have a conflict resolution meeting, it's almost like you're putting things on the table and running them before they're an issue. It's like, okay, I know this is your trigger. You know, this is my trigger. We know this is coming up, right? We're together. How are we going to agree to deal with those things? Is that kind of what it looked like for you when you had that meeting?
Yeah. And I won't get into everything because it's personal. But like, there was something that I said to Derek, and I said, honey, you do struggle in this area. And at first he said, what did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. I said, well, you didn't do anything wrong yet. I said, but this is an area you struggle. And I said, it could be prone to conflict. So I said, what are we going to do? And that's just being real. I mean, we're kind of
it's being real.
It's being real.
And I can share what it was because we discussed it before.
Wait a minute, wait, which one are you going to share? Is it going to be yours?
I'll stick with me. And so, again, I've been accused in the past that sometimes, as dads and fathers, sometimes we have to transition from work to home. And so sometimes challenges or issues that happen at work, we tend to bring it home. So sometimes, I'll bring it home and it can impact my mood. It can impact how I present myself to the family when I come in. So Carol's point was because now that you're working from home, what can we expect? Because there's not going to be any transition. You're not going to have your 40-minute commute driving home.
Right.
It's basically going, when you leave work, you're going to be coming downstairs. So, are we going to be facing, maybe being in the bad mood with work? I say, well, and so again, I thought about it, that's a good point. No, it won't happen. I'm thankful to bring to my attention. I became, kind of had a, well, sure, I call it ducking and dodging. Sometimes person you're about to say something you don't want to hear, but it's in reality. And that's like, I will do my best not to do that, and I'll make sure that I don't want my time being home to be looked back like, okay, when is Dad going back to work? When is the show over? And so I think I've been.
Well, I love that. I love that because, you're also bringing that perspective. This has just been a small comfort to me as I've been going through it personally, but you're just bringing out that perspective. If you can try to put yourself in the future a little bit and imagine how you want to be able to look back on this time, it feels like a little energy towards doing better for me. And that's what I'm hearing you say too. You don't want your boys to look back on this time and go, oh my gosh, wasn't it great when Dad went back to work? And being able to talk about those stressors before they come, because you know each other. You know that this is going to trigger her, she's going to, or vice versa. And you talk about your step 4 is discuss the difference in homeschooling styles. And for those people who are schooling from home or suddenly finding themselves schooling at home, these tips can apply to anybody because we're all schooling from home at the moment. And whether that was homeschooling like you prepared for or a new thing, we're in the same boat. So how did you guys discuss the difference in homeschooling styles? What kind of advice do you give people for that?
Okay, but I want to say one more thing about the conflict, expectations. Because part of the conflict discussion was that now that I'm home, what's going to be the expectation? Who's going to cook dinner? You're home now. So those are the kind of things we discuss about who's going to make dinner, who's going to do certain things, because there is an expectation of me being home. And if you take my commute time and say, well, now you had that time to do things here, and, that infamous honey-do list. So it's talking about expectations as well.
Take the honey, and I can say this to women to take the honey-do list off the table, because all of you are in this together, and you need to make another. This is something we've never experienced. This is something I would hope all of us didn't think this was ever going to happen. We are not in the same. It's not, your husband's not on vacation, even if he's home. There's stress. I think you need to redo that, look at that honey to-do list different. I think that we are. And so like, I did take the honey to-do list off the table. It's not on the table. Do ask him to share making dinner, but I took the honey to-do list off the table. But you're happy to make dinner because we're not spending the money to buy dinner out. So
the win-win.
But the homeschool style. Okay, back to the homeschool style. Okay, so the homeschool style is that, and I kind of alluded this before, is that prior to all of this happening, generally women and moms tell me, they say, like, when they speak to me, they say, how do you deal with your husband? I'm speaking now people who are homeschooling all along, and then I'm going to address schooling at home. They'll say, well, how do you deal with the fact that what you're doing, your husband comes and you did work all the time, and your husband comes home and they'll ask the kid, what did you do all day? And the kid said, I made cake. No, what did you do? I made cake. What did you do? Now, you may have made cake and the kid may have been adding and subtracting and doing all things, but the kid relates to the dad, I made cake. And so that's, to me, that's always been an issue. That's one of the reasons, like, I created a planner thing, a learning journal planner, to help parents and to help kids homeschooling anyway. because that was, to me, that was always an issue that sometimes we don't really talk about in homeschooling circles. But there can be sometimes a conflict, because I think sometimes, and not to stereotype or to make gender roles ironclad. I don't like any gender roles that are made ironclad. But sometimes the dads come home, they want to see quantitative work. What did my kid do? I want to know if they're going to score high on the test. I want to, so sometimes, so when it comes to the homeschooling style, when I alluded to you before, like I think along the long haul, and most moms do. And so, for instance, it's interesting. I have more confidence in what I do now, believe me, than I had years ago. But even so, years ago, my goal for my kids, well, both our goals, our homeschool goal was that we wanted independent learners.
Mm-hmm.
So someone making them independent means they don't necessarily do what a brick and mortar school would be. So I might not tell them what the answer to something is. I want them to sit down and struggle a little bit first.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to kind of, once I've given them some basics, so I don't want anyone to think I just throw things in front of them. But there's certain things I do to make them independent learners. And so now picture that when Derek steps into the picture, he comes downstairs. And I mean, I was kind of joking before, but he said he sees them doing math and they're struggling. The temptation is even, and they've done this too, they'll get up and they'll say, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. And they'll go upstairs and ask Derek the question to a math problem.
That's pretty sneaky.
Yeah, and they'll get downstairs and they'll sit at the table and while they'll go like, oh, well, I got the answer here. I'm like, okay, but see, I'm always going to say, I'm not going to just look and say, how did you get the answer to that? I mean, it goes both ways. They're kind of sneaky. It goes both ways because the other day they did me a reading comprehension. They told me, say, see, Mom, we read the story and we did a picture of the story and we wrote a whole thing. I was like, oh, I'm all impressed. I was like, hey, you guys can go and play now. And then you went over it with them and it turns out they didn't do it.
Again, it goes back to the intentionality. As a homeschooling dad, one thing that all dads want to do, but they don't get the opportunity to do, is to play a role in the homeschooling. I mean, play an active role in actual homeschooling. You know, most homeschooling families are typically a one-income family. So the father usually feels that his job is to go out, earn the money, so they can take care of his family and they can homeschool. But we also oftentimes look for opportunities to play a practical role. And so this, in the midst of all this chaos that we're going through now as a city-state world, the opportunity as a homeschooling father to be involved in a practical way. So yes, as I'm doing my work, as the boys come upstairs, I have the opportunity, you know, as I'm doing my work to also engage with them, also to go with schoolwork with them and speak to them. And, you know, they run upstairs and say, oh, Dad, I did so-and-so, I got a 85 on my reading comprehension. And, you know, so rather than waiting for me to get home, they can tell me right during the day. And then also during the day, I have the opportunity of really actually playing a role. I mean, even at work, you work, you know, you take breaks, you know, make a phone call to your family. So that time now being used that I'm actually in person with them. So I can take the time to have them sit down and go over their reading comprehension questions and show them what they get wrong and, you know, what they did wrong, as to why they got the wrong answer, and show them what's the appropriate way to do it. And so it made me feel good that I'm playing an active role in their education.
Well, I want to go back to a couple of things I want to make sure we mention. First of all, is that Cheryl and Derek have a nonprofit called Family Success, and you can find it at www.familysuccess.org. And that's also an offshoot of that is your ministry and nonprofit, Derek, intentionaldad.org. And on your Family Success website, do I understand you have a free ebook that talks about ways to be successful in your marriage? And I want to bring that up because we're getting some more questions just about the stress and how to deal with this stress. And your unique perspective is as marriage counselors, as married people, but also as people who have some experience with that stress as it relates to homeschooling. So maybe we could step back just a little bit to that conflict resolution and talk more about practical ways to deal with the added stress of this time. You have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you did, because there was some things I had wanted to say, but I didn't want to cut it short. One of the ways that we talked about was saying, okay, like Derek was saying with expectations, and then say that here's the thing. we're two, you know, we're two very different people, and so we're going to handle stress differently. We're going to handle conflict differently, and so we have to give each other the space to do it. Now, one of the things I've suggested is that, well, one of the things I've suggested is one, that you give each other space. Sometimes it's going to be hard. I know those of you who are in apartments and you're like, well, I have to see him all the time. Give yourself there's a little space that you go to where within the house. I know it's going to be hard, where you could say, I just want to de-stress. Like if I'm in this space, don't come in and speak to me. Don't come in. I don't even want to engage right now, because now you can't just pick up sometimes and go out. It's hard. And some people, that's the way of dealing with stress. They kind of want to disconnect. And so sometimes you just need to know that particular place in the house. The importance of also meditating, prayerful meditating. And when I say prayerful meditating, I know some of you think, no, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer. But I do believe in Christian meditation, and that is taking a scripture, letting it go over and over in your head. And don't get up and have a whole long list of scriptures. Sometimes you could just pray and just deal with one scripture, and just have, it would be really great if you just have, that will keep me in perfect peace if my mind is stayed on thee. If that becomes your scripture that you meditate on for the whole time. But sometimes we think meditation, we still have to bring this Western mindset in, and we think, okay, I meditate on this scripture, let me go move to the next one. But we really haven't, as my pastor would say, cockroachized it to the point of where it's like really, really in us. So to take a scripture and meditate on it, giving one another space. And I think sometimes, and this is kind of a higher level conflict, but since I'm going to go here, There's some marriages, you said that marriage is getting close, but there's some marriages you entered into this quarantine with a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Some marriages that you were already hanging by a thread. There were some marriages that were already, you actually were surviving because dad was going out to work all the time. And
right.
Mom going out to work. In that case, and you're being put together, let's not have this Pollyanna, everything's going to be good because I love you. And we're like, no. You have to decide what things, I spoke to somebody who's in a really, really difficult situation with her husband. And she said to me, how am I going to go? I'm not going to be able to get out to church. She says, I'm not going to be able to get out to my friends. And she said, but we butt heads. And she said, they get into yelling matches. And she said, I'm concerned it's going to cross over into physical. It was a real concern. She wasn't making it up. And I said to her, let's work out a plan. I said, this issue, we're going to quarantine. You're not going to deal with this issue. I said, in your mind, no matter what, you will not deal with this issue. I said, these are the 2 or 3 things that you can deal with. I said, and that sometimes you need to reach out to a friend. So I said, these are the times you can call me. Again, having boundaries, by the way, because sometimes when you're at counseling, people calling you all the time. But I have to say, these are the times you can call me. These are the people that you can reach out with. These are some of the online connections that you can make. So the reality is that you can't there's a reason why some marriages are coming out and the divorce rate is higher. You have to decide, what things am I going to do? So we spoke about parenting. Parenting has the potential to explode because kids will play you against one another. I don't care if your kids love the Lord. I don't care if they get up and they sing, have these little angelic voices. The kids it's just our fallen nature. They will try to play you against one another. So it's important to have that united front. And to know, even you have a united front, the kid might come and ask you something because they know Derek's working or whatever. So you have to know, it's kind of like knowing those things. If you're going in with a really serious issues, you have to say, what issues am I going to deal with? And some things, it's okay to say, I'm going to put it on the shelf.
Just prioritizing those issues as you're dealing with the stress to help make it bite-sized, digestible. Yeah, Derek?
Yeah. And there's some very practical things also in addition to what you're saying. For instance, in the environment of this coronavirus, and you're sheltering together the family, we should watch the news. We should know what's going on. We should be informed, but we should limit that. Okay, we don't want that to become our source of faith or rule of conduct. And so kind of minimizing that. But then at the same time, there are some very practical things like examine what is causing you stress. You know,
Mm,
so if it's a homeschooling family, I remember years ago, one thing that caused Cheryl stress was curriculum. You know, always trying to find that right curriculum for the kids. And
mhm,
sometimes she would get one she thought was great, but then, you know, she got it for a while, it didn't work. And she
mhm,
felt guilty, you know, again, we're a one income family. She felt guilty about having spent all this money on curriculum and it's not working and wanted to buy another one. And
mm,
so, you know, she would go online, she would go, well, what's it for online? She would look around, ask people, and that was causing a lot of stress. And then when we talked about it, I said, okay, fine, you know, we have a budget. We budget for homeschooling and we budget for curriculum. And we also add in the budget in case you got to change it. So that kind
mhm,
of alleviates some of the stress, knowing that she had the flexibility if she had to spend more money to, if she couldn't get the money back from the curriculum, and usually we give to somebody else and she had to buy something else. So just kind of
mhm.
looking at what's causing you stress and how can you problem solve around that. Because
Right.
everybody's stress level is different. What causes stress is going to be different. But the thing is to identify what it is and how can we problem solve this? How can we
Mm,
solve this?
that's good, Derek. It's very practical. And also, just like what you're saying, Cheryl, be mindful of what you're thinking about, what you're meditating on, what you're focusing on, because that's going to affect the emotional margin you have available to deal with the inevitable stressors that are going to come from being together 24/7 and not having normal routines and all those other pieces and parts. A lot of people trying to figure out for the first time ever, what in the world is school at home? How am I supposed to do all this? So
Yeah.
those are really
Mhm.
practical tips. Well, number 5, because we're all, we have 10 more minutes. Number 5 is learn communication techniques and use word pictures. So I would love to hear more about this tip.
Okay.
Well, sure, I can talk about. I mean, I'll just say this with communication. We feel that communication is really like the foundation of any relationship,
Yeah.
of
Mm-hmm.
any marriage, and
Mm-hmm.
we oftentimes don't exercise the best communication skills. And when we don't, it creates a lot of error. It creates a lot of holes in the relationship that oftentimes go unfilled. So if you're exercising and putting a focus and understanding the need for good communication, that can definitely strengthen your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll let Cheryl talk about word pictures.
So it's going to be the real quick version of word pictures, but usually talk on. But anyway, okay. So a word picture in scripture, we know that Jesus spoke more to farmers. You know, it was an agrarian culture. He spoke to farmers, and because that's what people understood. We understand better. I often tell people this. I was telling my kids in my writing class this. We really don't need to move people from their head. People really move and they change from their heart. Even the most logical, philosophical people, we want to get their hearts to change. So when you think about it, a word picture cuts across logic and moves a person to the heart. We see that in greater detail in book of Samuel when we see King David, you know, the prophet Samuel has to go to David. David has committed, you know, as most Christians would know, David has committed to sin. He's committed to sin with Bathsheba. And the prophet goes to King David and he tells him a story. So he could have said anything. He could have went. He was a prophet. He could have said, God came to me and he told me to tell you this. See, and this is interesting how God uses us in our personality. Anyway, Samuel goes to King David and he says, can I tell you a story? Um, and he could have just came to him, like I said, let me tell you God. So he said, and so David says, of course, tell me a story. So he said, there was a man with ewe lambs. Well, David was a shepherd. And David loved the lambs. He loved lambs. He was, I mean, he was the heart of, he loved lambs. And he talks about, you know, I'm paraphrasing it. Cheryl called a paraphrase, so I could do it real fast. So he talks about the story of the lambs and how he loved the lambs. And he talks about the man. He says, this man took the lamb, you know, the beloved lamb. And what does David do? David gets angry. And David says, bring that man to me. I'll let the man. And David's really, really angry. And you know, I picture this in my mind. Samuel just waits, lets David get angry, and then he said, you are the man. What does David do? David truly repents. Sometimes, you know, as we say in our family, you could say, I'm sorry, even with the kids. I guess we have time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry doesn't mean much, but repentance is what we want. Repentance is a total turning around. When you give a person a word picture, they can totally, it crosses from their head and gets to their heart. But a word picture used with a person, it has to be something that's uniquely personal and that the other person could relate to. And that's why I was like, oh, it's a short period. Anyway, so like when I think about Derek, like something that he uniquely relates to is Star Trek. The first generation, first, I don't know what we call it, the original. So if I'm giving him a word picture, even though I don't watch Star Trek, see the fact that I have to, I'll go in and I'll try to do a Star Trek a word picture to give to him. Now some people have said to me, because they've heard me say that, they'll say, oh, I tried it and it didn't work. But really what they're trying is they'll say, they're giving a word picture based on something of somebody else. So let me give you a word picture my son gave me years ago, and I still remember this. So years ago, my son, my oldest, who's now going for a PhD, but anyway, I switched his math book a few times because I was concerned that he didn't have gaps. So all his homeschooling moms, you know, we all get into this.
Yes.
I don't want to have any gaps. You can't talk about that. Okay, I'm going there. He's like kicking me underneath the table, like, move on. Okay, so I changed his math book a time. So he says, Mom, can I tell you a story? I was about to change it for like a third time. He said, Mom, can I tell you a story? So I said, sure. So he says, how do you feel when we go out of town and you're speaking? Now at that point, we were going out of town a lot. We were really a lot. And so I said, oh, he said, no, you're ready to come home. So I said, oh, when I come home and I'm tired, I'm really excited. So he says, what happens when we're on the highway and you see the signs? And he went, so he said, he went through, you see, 100 miles till you get home, you see 20 miles, you say, he went through each thing. And I said, oh, well, I get excited. And he said, oh, when you see 10 miles, and I said, I get excited. I said, I really start getting excited. He said, yeah, really, really? And then he said, what happens when you get to 5 miles? I said, oh, I started thinking my bed. He said, Mom, what happens when you get to 5 miles? If somebody told you had to turn around and go all the way back to where you started from and then come home again, how would you feel? So I said, I would be angry with that person. I would be frustrated. I said, it would make me so angry. I said, I wouldn't even want to take the trip again. I wouldn't even, and he looked at me, he said, Mom, that's how I feel every time you change my math book. Now, he could have said, Mom, you frustrating me. He could have said, Mom, you, I get really, but because he did that, he took a word picture, something that I could relate to, and brought it into my world. I never changed his math book again. And the reason I mentioned that my son did it, I mean, we do that as adults, we do it like the boys now even do it. They've done it with me in terms of things that they want to, they find something that's really me, and they kind of like, they use it with their aunties, they use it, that's what a word, like in a word, again, that's what a word, in essence, that's what a word picture. So a word picture really is helpful in times of crisis because it'll get somebody to stop thinking here and to start thinking here. And we all think logically. So some people say, oh no, women don't like, let me tell you, I'm very logical.
Especially if the logic
logical.
can be tied to feelings, if
Right,
you can,
right.
and I love that approach too, because it's less, it's sort of detached from a personal accusation, like you're making me feel this way, or I feel this way because you're doing these things. All of a sudden, everybody can engage in this sort of this story that's outside of your experience, and then you can bring it home with the emotion that's tied to that. That is a really good tip. Well, we've run out of time, believe it or not, which goes so fast. But the 5 tips that we talked about today were: number 1, keep a daily routine. I loved how you said that. One of the things I took notes on here, Derek, was you said, just be careful that as a father, whoever it is that's home that isn't usually home, that you're careful not to trespass, that you're able to enter in with sensitivity and intentionality and flexibility. And that leads into your second step, which was set goals each day. You talked about how you guys come together in a high level way. It's not minute by minute, but just what are the most important plans coming up, it sounds like, that you need to adapt to. I love this idea, having a conflict resolution meeting ahead of time to help set expectations, to already have an agreed upon plan before there's any stress surrounding it. Number 4
Heather,
was,
can I just,
yes.
Heather, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is one point. Most people watching it now is going to say, but I'm already in quarantine. How do I do that? But this is the great thing. Once you've watched it, you can say, oh, wow, let's go have a conflict resolution. I saw this great Facebook Live, as I could do it. So just so people know that they don't, if you didn't do it in the beginning, you still can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is all proactive. This is all what you get to start with. And every moment is a new start, right? Yeah. Failure is just feedback. It's not final. Yeah. If we've made mistakes, which we all are going to do, it's okay. We learn from that, and we can apply these tips that you've talked about. Discuss the difference in homeschooling styles. And Rochelle, one of our consultants, she she piped in and said when her husband comes home, her kids will always say they did nothing all day, which of course makes you feel great as a homeschooling mom, right? And then lastly, learn communication techniques, but specifically, like all of these topics, we could talk for hours about each one, but you brought up the really helpful tool that diffuses a lot of the intensity and the stress by just using word pictures and telling stories to help people understand how you're being impacted and how you feel. So I want to say again that you have resources on your website. You're both authors. Derek has written a really helpful book that actually my husband is reading, Derek. So that's pretty
wow.
cool. So yeah, it's www.familysuccess.org, and then Derek's ministry to fathers, intentionaldad.org, which is such a unique and amazing resource. So I love you guys. You are amazing models of wisdom and practicality and authenticity. You're very real about this process, and I know that you're being used in a lot of people's lives, and now even more so as people are being able to watch on Facebook Live. So thank you so much for today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.